now. And oops, it keeps jumping around while I'm trying to do it. Yay. So we're going to talk about on-the-job training today. And I'm going to put up my screen so I can see you guys again. So what is on-the-job training? With CSS Workforce New York, it's any training that begins as someone is a new hire or as someone is moving into a new position and they're being upskilled. So we would typically write a contract with a business that would reimburse 50% of that individual's wages during their identified training period up to $2,000. So this is a new hire up to $2,000, or this is someone who, say, has been a machinist. They've gone through machinist 1, 2, and 3 levels, and now they're going to move into a manufacturing supervisory position over machinists, and they need to learn that additional skill. We would fund that training for that additional skill. So how do you know if somebody is eligible for an OJT, or how do you know that when they come to you that you could reach out to us and find out more about the OJT program? We have what's called an eligible participant marketing letter, and you can see it on the screen. And it's something that's given to job seekers and dislocated workers who are individuals who've lost jobs through no fault of their own, or they've there's many different reasons you can become a dislocated worker, but most often they're given these letters because it's intended to help them market themselves to attach to the workforce. It specifically is saying that there's additional funding that is available for these folks to find new employment and to find new skills. The first part of the letter is actually to the customer to let them know how to market themselves. And the second part is actually a letter to the employer and telling them how to apply. In essence, how to apply is getting in touch with me. So my contact information is on this screen. Obviously, during this COVID period, a little bit of our contact information has changed. I think my phone number is different than the actual phone number on the marketing letter. I'll have to make sure we get to the career centers and get that changed before we start seeing actual customers again. But this letter, if you receive it from a job seeker and you've just interviewed them and you're thinking about hiring them, please reach out to me quickly, because there is some steps we have to do prior to hiring them, because we have to develop a contract with the business. Now, it doesn't take very long and it's not very hard. It just must be done prior to the start of their first day. So what makes a trainee eligible? So in our system, our database, which is the unemployment database, we can check and see if somebody's registered with a selective service. So if it's a male born after December 31st, 1959, they must be registered with a selective service, or they have to show us that it wasn't willful, that they did not register. There has to be an identified skills gap. So you're interested in this person and they have good soft skills. They probably are a good fit for that particular group of people. But you needed them really to have like 6 skills and they only have 2 or 3 of them. So what we would do is we would write a training contract with you to kind of upskill that person for those 3 or 4 skills that they really need. Our training contracts are from 200 to 1,040 hours. So you have an opportunity to use that much time to train the person. But I typically tell people we only reimburse up to $2,000 of their wages. So when that individual reaches $4,000 in gross wages, we are pretty much done. So most of our training contracts come between 300 to 400 hours. And at that point, they've reached that maximum. We are always under priority of service. And if you can read the bullets yourself, but most often it doesn't apply to our customized training or our OJT training because it's a different item line. The only time we would have to worry about priority of service is if we got down to a very small amount of money left in our pocket and that we had to figure out, so out of these 10 people, who would we fund first? But that has not happened since I've been here, but it's always good to know that it's there. Also, for our OJT, that person's hiring wage or that person's wage has to be less than $29.75. So that's considered the average hourly wage rate in New York State at this time. It might go up a little bit this year, it might go down a little this year. We'll have to check on that. But typically it's $29.75. So how does an employer become eligible to use the funding? The first thing we would have to do for any business is make sure that their due diligence is current or renew of the 90 days. What is a due diligence? It's essentially a business background check. So we're not going to give state and federal funding to a business that hasn't paid their taxes. Someone who hasn't paid their payroll taxes, someone who hasn't handled something that has gone on with an OSHA violation. You can have an OSHA violation as long as it's being remediated and somebody is actually working on it, that's fine. So in essence, they're just making sure that the business is responsible, has been a responsible participant in the community. These are the two documents that are typically sent for an annual renewal. And it usually takes us 3 to 5 days to process them with the state when they get returned to us. And the only thing they do is they send me back. It says, oh, the business was found responsible. If there was any issue with the due diligence, you would receive an email regarding that. I don't. So I honestly would never know the reason until you, and most often those can be handled. They're just small things. I would say a change in business status is typically a problem that you have. So somebody bought out your business, they would have to follow up on that and see what happened. So after that due diligence is complete, what are we looking for from the business? Well, we really only need 2 pieces of paper. The first one, is this OJT preparation information document. It literally is just information about the person you want to hire. And I also slipped in who's approved to sign contracts, because sometimes when I get down to that time, I've written a contract with a person I've been talking to all along, and it turns out somebody else has to be the person that signs that. So I thought it'd be great to get that up front before I start developing a contract. I have the due diligence is performed because we need to make sure that that's current. And then every 90 days, there's a 1-page form we send out that you just say everything is the same, yep, and then it's good. When the training outline is prepared, because the business is expected to create a training outline. Now, many businesses have training outlines for each position, and they just copy and paste that into our form. And that's fine. Sometimes people get more specific about what that person needs within their company. That's fine too. But what you can see on the rest of this document is just the contact information for the person that you're intending to hire, what their hiring wages, what the position that they're going to be hired for, who's going to train them and what that person's title is, and when you would like them to start. The other thing we ask for is the last 4 digits of their social security number. And the reason for that is because our system, the unemployment database, we can look somebody up based on those last 4 digits. So that gives me an idea about whether that person's already in our system or whether we need to do some additional work to get them in the system. But you don't have to worry about that because that is done within our career centers. So the second document we need from you is to tell us how you want to accomplish your goal with this person. It is a training outline. It can be very simple. I don't need to know every little piece of QuickBooks that you're going to teach that person. I just need to know that you're going to spend 100 hours to teach them QuickBooks. And in any other task, it's similar to that. You just kind of break down how many hours ballparking that you think it would take for them to learn that task. You put the minimum performance standard in there. What are they going to be learning? And it goes typically from 200 to 1,040 hours. We can't fund anything less than 200 hours, and we can't fund anything over 1,040. But like I said before, if you're thinking gross wages at $4,000, it's typically somewhere between 300 and 400 hours. You don't have to worry about getting the trainee to sign off on this form because the counselor will do that when they contact the trainee. So you send these 2 pieces of paper to me. That's it. That's all the business has to do beyond their due diligence. And some people keep their due diligence going year round, whether they're using us or not, so they don't even have to worry about that. So what happens next? I send those 2 pieces of paper over to our Career Center counselors, and they will actually contact that person. Now, in the past, we would call them in and they'd sit face-to-face and have an interview similar to what you see on the screen. But now that the challenges with COVID, we've been doing everything digitally. So they would have a Teams meeting with that person. They may have a phone call with that person. But what they're going to do is they're going to assess that skill gap. So I'm very motivated to give businesses money and write contracts with them. And I'm pretty sure my businesses are pretty motivated to have a piece of that money in their own pocket. The counselor is the one who looks and says, yep, that person does need this training and this is the specific skill gap that they have. They also get them to sign that training outline, which eventually ends up into the customer, the OJT contract. And they also develop a relationship with that person. And when I talk to you just a hair later about on-site reviews, I'll tell you why that relationship is so important. So the next thing we do, as soon as they put that information in the system, they've met with the customer, they send me a signed training outline, is I'll create an agreement with the business. And you need to understand that these are always reimbursement agreements. You never owe us anything. We would owe you if you train this person in these skill sets between this date and that date. And that's all they really are. And that's what the contract is telling you, is how much we're going to allow. Most often it's the full value. And like I said, we can write a contract for a new hire, or we can write a contract for a skill upgrade, but those contracts must be written and executed prior to the start of any training or the start of that person coming into work. So during the period of the actual contract, I have to come out and do what's called an on-site review. And I used to laugh with people and I'd say, well, they just want to make sure that you're not hanging them up in the back room by your toes and beating you with a wet noodle, you know. That's really not what it's about. It's just finding out how that person is doing in that environment and finding out how the employer is doing with the trainee. So they are literally two different assessments, but they're about 10 questions each, so they're pretty simple. The trainee has an opportunity just to say how things are going and let us know if they have any concerns, and the employer has the exact same opportunity. Where this became valuable once is I was working with a business that had an individual who was consistently late to work. And it was becoming to a point where they were considering letting that person go because it was a manufacturing industry and they just couldn't wait for that person to show up for that machine to keep running. And I identified that with the employer, and I knew that I was going to have an on-site review with the trainee. So when I did have that on-site review, I asked if there was a challenge, and the person indicated that they had a daycare challenge, that they had 4 children under the age of 8, and that very often their particular daycare person was calling in, was canceling, and she was unable to take her children there. So we worked with that trainee, and I sent that information over to the counselor, and the counselor worked with the trainee in order to find additional daycare to keep her with the ability to keep showing up to work. So that relationship that was established with the counselor actually helped the trainee during their working period find additional childcare. So it's a really important relationship that we have. So in the end, all we ask you to do is tell us how it went. So we'll ask for weekly pay stubs from the beginning to the end of the contract dates. Our funding is only able to be used with full-time permanent positions. So they must work 30 hours a week, or the hours for that whole week are ineligible. So I always say if somebody worked 29.75 hours, have them sort pencils, fill paper, do something for the next 15 minutes, because then it would allow for them the whole week to be counted. If it's just short of 30 hours, we can't count the entire work week. It can't include vacation or sick pay anytime the person is not actually being trained, cannot include overtime or bonus pay, and must be within the contract payroll periods. Typically, I divide the hours, say there's 400 hours, I would divide it by 30, not 40. So it gives you a few extra weeks in the contract just in case there's a week where that person is sick, off on vacation, or there's a holiday or something going on that would bring them down below 30 hours. So in the end, I do some calculations based on the employment records that I receive. I send you an on-the-job training reimbursement voucher, which essentially says, how did I come up with the amount that you're going to be reimbursed? Most often it's the same value as the contract. Obviously during COVID, there's been some strange things. So some of them aren't reaching full contract value, or because the Paycheck Protection Program, they're already being funded federally, so I can't double dip. So there's going to be some interesting things happening right now, but typically they would reach full contract value. You would sign that. The trainee has to sign that too, stating that their training is completed. And then it would come back to me, and CSS Workforce New York from our fiscal office will write a check to the business. So it doesn't go up any higher than us. It comes straight out of our office. And then that contract has ended. Does anybody have any questions? Hmm. Can you see where this would work for you, Jeremy, at all?
I think I'm muted. Hold on.
I can hear you.
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we start off, I mean, in any given point throughout a year, we start off new candidates that have no electrical experience, and then we take them over usually it's a 5-year program, 7-year program, and train them for to be electrician. And I mean, very seldom do we get people that they're fully certified unless we call them directly from the hall. So I definitely think that there's the potential. I'd like to go through it once just to see how it works. And we also have our own fabrication shop right here in the Heights that, you know, typically a younger candidate or someone with no experience whatsoever, we usually slide them into that and get them used to the tools, just standard hand tools and ladder safety and all that, just to before we put them out on a construction site. So I would think that we could probably work that right in. There's a foreman, which is the trainer in the fab shop. So
excellent. So if you'd like me to, I can send you that due diligence paperwork to get you started so that you're always just eligible.
Okay.
And then when you find somebody,
I just started.
Pieces are pretty easy.
I just started 2 new guys this morning.
Oh my!
And
I should have done this early last week, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I just so I'm still in the hunt for probably 3 more for this fall.
Okay. So I'll make sure I send that over to you, and I'll send you over the templates for the prep information and for a training outline. Because if you know the role, you could fill out that training outline now and just fill in the little pieces when you actually determine who you want to hire. Most often, it takes about a week for our counselors just to get that person in and get all the paperwork signed. So we would say if you were, looking at somebody and you gave me the paperwork on Monday, we would hope by, they would start the next Monday. So we like to have about at least a week just to make sure we can get the paperwork done.
So when you go, I would have a slight little problem having you go to an active job site. Well, actually, it wouldn't be a problem. I mean, you would just have to wear a hard hat and safety clothes.
Well, we can meet in an office if that's where that is occurring. If there's some place that we can meet, because usually the on-site review only takes about 10-15 minutes.
Okay.
So it can be the start of a day before that person goes out to a job site. I don't necessarily have to be in a work environment. Most often those individuals will come into a conference room, or they'll meet me in somebody's office, or sometimes it's the hallway, wherever we can find a little piece of space. And like I said, it's only 10 questions. Most often, I don't hear much else unless it's something, like I said, that I can handle through a counselor.
Is there a cap of how many so in a given year, is there a cap of how many that we could run through this program? A
lot depends on the amount of funding that we have received for the year. And we will tell you that with this whole COVID-19, federal funding has been reduced by about 20% for us.
Yep.
But that being said, once we get to a certain level, which typically is around $20,000 or $30,000 worth of reimbursement for a particular business, we take that to our board and we ask them to approve additional funding for that business, especially if the business is going through a growth period. Or especially if they've just added more money into our account. I was talking to you earlier about dislocated worker money. That is specific for people who've lost their job through no fault of their own. Almost everybody in COVID that lost their job is a dislocated worker. So do I see the possibilities of having some money thrown at that particular pot if it becomes available? Yes, but we haven't received it yet.
Okay.
So the question is yes and no. Yes, we can keep writing contracts as long as our board says it's okay to use our funding that way.
Okay. So you'll send me over the paperwork and then I'll start getting stuff
Absolutely.
moving in a direction.
Yeah, because I think even if you just get the due diligence in place, even if you don't have the people yet, it'll make that go much faster for you when you do decide to hire somebody.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Sounds good.
Yvette, do you have any questions for us?
But Kelly, I would like to say something real quick. Over the week, oops, I'll wait till after you answer Yvette.
Okay. I do not actually have this packet already. What am I? Hey, yay. So good. So Kirian, what's your question?
It was really neat because over the weekend I was out and about, and I know a couple of managers at local businesses, and we were talking about COVID and employer, and I actually brought up this training today. I said, by the way, Monday, we're going to have this. They go, oh, you work with Kelly Christopher. As a matter of fact, yes, I do, And they're like, oh my gosh, this OJT has helped us and saved us money. And I just thought it was just kind of ironic running into these individuals and having this today, and to get that positive feedback that just how beneficial this program is for them.
And the funny part was, in the past, OJT was perceived as being the hardest program to get started, and really it's not. It's very easy on the employer, and the heavy lifting comes on our side, where in customized training the paperwork is the heavy lifting on the employer's side, and we're just data entry clerks on our side. So it's very interesting how that balanced out, and more people that use OJT, the more opportunities we have to use it. And it's nice that each contract is $2,000. So if you typically, when you're doing the paperwork, it feels good. We did a customized training for 59 people this week, and that business is receiving about $30,000 in reimbursement. So that's a really nice opportunity for them. It doesn't take very long to do that in OJT either. 15 people. So are there any other questions today? Laura, do you have anything?
Nope, I think you've really thoroughly went over it.
Okay. Well, if anybody needs to get in touch with me, here's my contact information up on the screen. That's 607-368-8704 is my cell phone number. And Christopher K at CSSWFNY.com is my email address. This video will be available on our webpage as soon as Deveria takes it off and puts it up there, because I can't do it because she organized it all for us. And I'm really happy to have an opportunity to talk with you today. And we will be offering this session multiple times. We're just starting to use this platform to talk to businesses because I have been unable to actually go into many businesses because of COVID. So hopefully we'll be offering this on a regular basis. So if you have friends or anybody else you think should be hearing this information, feel free to send them to our webpage or to send them to the next session. It was nice to see you all today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. It's nice meeting you.
Yep. Have a great day.
Kelly, thank you again.
Yep. Take care, Jeremy.